Hi, I'm Elijah. Christofer insists that the nonviolence of some Christians in the Roman Empire and the willingness to be martyred which existed among the disciples of Y'shua demonstrates a doctrinal approval of pacifism. This is part of Christofer's straw man, and is the first instance of his poor use of logic. Please view the description for more information. His appeal to the practices of the Roman churches was less than astute, given that these are the same churches which are rebuked frequently in Scripture for their continued use of pagan customs, idolatrous rituals and observances, and for their sexual immorality, such as men taking their own stepmothers in marriage. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 1. Which of these practices did they inherit from Jesus? None. Pacifism would be no different, if it is even factual. Christofer expects us to assume that A. Pacifism was a doctrine, and B. that their pacifist doctrine was founded on scriptural authority, rather than the teachings of a few church fathers in the Roman Empire. Christofer is begging the question, his second mistake. The churches of the Roman Empire were not respected by those who had known and followed Y'shua in person. The writings of the Roman Church Fathers were written from a Christo-pagan perspective, even condemning biblical observances such as Passover and a sundown Friday to Saturday Sabbath. As theological authorities, such men must be dismissed. Even Christofer acknowledges that Jesus wasn't a pacifist, but then makes the assertion that his followers certainly should be. Bizarre. Christofer contradicts himself, the third example of poor logic, and proceeds to heresy. This is supposed to validate his opinions. The Holy Bible clearly counsels believers to be imitators of Messiah, yet we find Christofer enticing them to do otherwise. In his foresight, Kepha had the measure of Christofer and his ilk. And there did come also false prophets among the people, as also among you there shall be false teachers, who shall bring in besides destructive sects. 2 Peter, chapter 2, verse 1. Christofer cares more for the traditions of falsehood than for the commandments of God. There exists few, if any, historical accounts outside of the Synoptic Gospels regarding the Nazarenes' policies on violence. So Christofer argues from silence, his fourth error. I'll just stick to boring methods of argumentation, using old-fashioned things such as facts and irrefutable examples from scriptural authority, to demonstrate that pacifism was not endorsed, taught or practiced by Y'shua, the disciples or the apostles. My methods won't win me many friends. Unlike Christofer, I'll never be popular and likable, but I'd worry if I were. Y'shua taught his disciples that they would be hated by the world, and that it would be suspicious to have the people of this world speak well of them, because the same people spoke well of those who stoned the prophets. Also, James, the brother of Y'shua, wrote that friendship with the world is hatred toward God. So while Christofer seeks to bake apple pie and share hugs with the world, telling its children whatever their selfish hearts long to hear, I'll preach the word uncensored, rejoicing when hated for doing so. Because unlike Christofer, I don't see myself someday floating on a cloud and playing a harp in his version of heaven, a place where he has taught the world to sing and to hold hands. I obey Y'shua's command to carry a weapon for self-defense. Luke chapter 22, verse 36. I embrace Saul's instruction that a believer's only responsibility is to live in peace, so long as it depends on him or her, which evidently legislates for the occasions when the option to live in peace is no longer available due to the actions of others. Romans chapter 12, verse 18. And I respect the directive found in Revelation 13. He who brings into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword has to be killed with the sword. Here is the endurance and the belief of the set-apart ones. when Yeshua returns as the Messiah, the warrior king, as he promised, to establish the Messianic kingdom, it comes physically to earth, violently and suddenly. It's a revolution. It will be ruled with a rod of iron, and shall dash the nations to pieces. I plan to be among the warriors on white horses fighting side by side with Yeshua. Christofer can sit playing his harp, waiting to burn. Christofer's postulate that the disciples and apostles allowed themselves to be killed reveals the fourth flaw in his logic. The problem for Christofer is that he assumed those disciples and apostles who did lose their lives to have been in a position to choose on every occasion. The circumstances of death, the necessity of death, the desire for death, and allowing one's death are things which he has erroneously presumed to be one and the same. In reality, there were those, such as Stephen and James, who suffered extrajudicial murders at the hands of mobs, and there are those who, while doing so willingly, laid down their lives in obedience with specific prophecies, the prophecy of Agabus in regards to Kepha's death, and the death of Yeshua being prime examples. The onus is on Christofer to prove that they all died in obedience to a pacifist doctrine found in the scriptures. It must be demonstrated that the will to die for the faith and pacifism are synonymous in the Bible. They are not, and he won't. Incidentally, fulfillment of prophecy was the motive behind Rabbi Y'shua's rebuke of Kepha after he had struck off the ear of Malchus with the sword which Y'shua had ordered him to carry. Y'shua chastened Kepha for attempting to prevent the fulfilling of prophecy, yet voiced no condemnation for the act of violence itself, choosing to say no more than to warn that anyone drawing the sword to prevent his arrest will die by the sword. Matthew, chapter 26, verses 51 to 54. Stay tuned for part 2.